Hello, welcome back to the channel, Vintage Fishing Reel Rescue. Today on the bench I have this Silstar DF70 spin cast reel, or spinning reel, I'm sorry. Picked this one up at a garage sale. The little bit rough shape, I mean it's not bad. It's not all beat up, but it is kind of faded looking, a little dirty. It's a little bit stiff when you turn the handle here. Probably all gummed up inside, I'm sure. The drag seems to be working. So we're gonna take this apart and get this back working, back out on the water, back in service. So I like to start with taking off the spool here. We spin the drag knob off here and set that aside. Oh yeah, there's quite a bit of debris, dirt, and everything up in here, up on the top of the spool. Looks like it's been laying on the ground. And the underside matches. There's quite a bit of stuff on here. There's a little bit of oil, grease. So let's get this apart and get this cleaned up. And take this handle off here. There's a screw that doesn't look like the correct screw for it, but it is working for it, so that'll work. As long as the handle don't fall off, that's pretty much it. And we pull that screw out. The handle will slide out. Then I'm going to put the screw back in here so I don't lose it, misplace it. The folding mechanism works good on that one. Okay, let's take this side cover off and we can get in here and see what's going on with it. Pull these 4 screws out here. Yep. This is a graphite reel. Nice size reel, would be good for light saltwater, pretty much all fish, all freshwater fishing. You know, all of the screws so far are the same size, which is good to know because you want to always compare them just to make sure. You don't want to put a long screw into a short hole and end up messing something up. So I'll stick them screws over in my parts tray here. Use parts trays to keep everything organized, and that way when I get done, if I have parts left there, I know I missed something. Right, let's get this cover off of here. Right, this looks like it does not have any ball bearings that I can see so far. It looks like it uses bushings. This would be a lower end reel. This bushing has notches on it that fit into the case a certain way. You want to pay attention when reassembling so you get that back in there in that direction. Otherwise it won't go back together very good. Let's pull the main gear out here. And quite a bit of grease on there. We'll get that cleaned up and get that off there. That's probably what's causing it to hang up. You want to pay attention here too. This spring here, you want it goes into a certain spot. You need to pay attention when you reassemble it. It goes right into that groove on that arm. That is for the anti-reverse lever. So that activates it when you are in the non-reverse position. When you flip the lever, this switch here to the, so you can go reverse or forward. Right there's the the reverse position. Right here is the position to let you go in forward and backward. See, this one here stops it from going backward. So you want to pay attention, make sure that gets back into that so that anti-reverse lockout works properly. We'll pull this screw here out. That'll allow me to pull the axle shaft out. Set that over my parts tray. Now the axle shaft will slide out. Kind of stuck there. That grease is quite sticky, so it'll work a lot better when we get this cleaned up. I like to take and inspect all these, do a little bit of cleaning as I go. Sometimes I wait till the end and clean all at once. Give it a good look over. Look, the axle shaft, you want to look, make sure it doesn't bend. The gear on the teeth on this aren't messed up. This is just the clicker here. So if those teeth are a little bit messed up, it's not really going to hurt much. There is a washer here. It's a fiber washer used as a spacer so that the spool is properly spaced, so the clicker on the bottom of the spool engages properly with the clicker wheel here. That spacer's, there it goes. Wasn't wanting to come off there. Just want to wipe that off, get that grease. Man, that grease is sticky. I wonder if that was some automotive grease or something they put in there, or just aged. No, I do not know the history of this reel at all. I did not bother even looking it up online. I'm guessing this is probably 80s, maybe even 90s fishing reel. We'll set that over in a parts tray. Now let's see, how does this one come out here? This one has the nut on the outside, so that's actually loose on there. So we take that right off with my fingers. Should be a little more snug than that, but that's okay. It makes it easier to get apart this time. I've got a lock washer there, split lock washer. Haven't seen that too many times on these reels, having an actual split lock washer like that. A lot of times they'll have a tooth lock washer or just a flat washer with a locking either ring or a screw that locks this nut into place to keep it from backing off while using it. And now we'll pull the spool off. Bail on that I can hear. I don't know if you can hear that. Sounds like it's quite gritty in there, and it's quite dirty under here too, you can tell. Looks like an insect was in here. I'm going to clean that all up. I'm going to take this apart, clean the bail arm out, and get it working nice and free so it'll trip properly. We'll do that in a minute. Oh, this does have one bearing in it. I did not know that, but that's how I learn. We pull these 3 screws out, and that's going to allow us to get that bearing out of there. That bearing looks like it's quite grease caked, and as sticky as that grease is, that's probably why it's the reel is quite stiff. But that won't be a problem. We'll get that all cleaned out, re-lubricated, and put back together, and it'll work just fine. I get these 3 screws out. Those are all the same length. So we'll pull this out. The bearing comes out with the pinion shaft and gear. This is the gear down here. This is for the anti-reverse. That lever that I showed you here engages that to keep you locked into reverse. Or locked out of reverse, whichever way you want to figure it. This one does have a spacer washer on the bottom of the bearing. I'm going to set them in my parts bay bin. Got this little cut off a vitamin bottle here. I like to put stuff like this into. I'm going to put it in there, put a little penetrating oil, let it sit there and soak. That will get a lot of that grease out of it and make it a lot easier to clean up, get the dirt and grime and everything out of there without too much hassle that way. Most any penetrating oil work well. Penetrating oil is a good cleaner. It has some solvents in it. I have PB Blaster here that I use, and I also have this Tri-Flow. It's a lubricant. It does penetrate. It's not as well of a penetrant, I don't believe, as the PB Blaster. I believe it has more lubricating properties. So I like to use this for lubricating areas that I can't, hard to get to with the straw there. And use the PB Blaster mostly for cleaning, freeing up stuff, removing rust, that kind of thing. Okay, we have this piece here. This is what makes that axle shaft go in and out to raise and lower the spool, so the fishing line goes back onto the spool evenly when you're reeling in. This has a groove here that rides on this pin on this gear. This gear is turned by the main shaft, and as it turns, you can see that pin is changing positions, getting closer and farther away from the front of the reel. That allows this to move in and out to move the axle shaft, which in turn moves the spool. That lifts out. We're going to lift out the gear. Wipe this off a little bit. The gear looks to be in pretty good shape. I don't see any damaged teeth, so I think the real issue was just the sticky grease. Either someone had used a grease, a not, heavier weight grease, or it's just from aging. I don't really know. I'm not going to worry about pulling this arm out here. There's no spring. The arm's moving freely and everything, so it'd just be a hassle to try to get that little screw and that arm back in there. The case does not have a lot of buildup of grease, dirt, and stuff in it, so I'm not going to worry too much about removing it and get every little thing out. This here's the lower bushing. It looks like it's actually out of place. I don't know if it maybe had done that when I pulled the main gear out, or if it's been in that position. It might have been there. It's kind of jammed in there. So someone may have had this apart and not got it back together properly. Bushing seems to be in okay shape. Get it all cleaned up here. I'll use a lot of paper towel. I use Q-tips. I've got brushes, like a soft or a plastic bristled brush I like to use in the gears. Clean the gears all out, get the hard pack stuff out of them. Let's see how that fits onto the shaft. It fits on this end. Yeah, it's decent. I think that's acceptable. It's not super loose on there, so I think that'll be just fine. I'll stick that back over there. Let's wipe this main gear off. We want to be careful not to knock that spring off. It should be on there decent, but if you get a little too aggressive, you may pop the spring off and lose it. Did not notice that, but there is a spacer washer. This was on the top side of the gear, which would go toward the side cover here. There's some grit and dirt on that. We'll get that cleaned up. Put that over my parts tray. Don't want to lose that. Yeah, that grease is quite gummy, as you can tell. It's not wanting to wipe out real well. There. Use a Q-tip and a little bit of, oh, maybe I'll just use the paper towel and the penetrating oil. Let's see here. I keep my Q-tips in an old medicine container. It keeps them nice, clean, and organized, so works well. I use a little bit of penetrating oil on this, get that grease out of there. See, Q-tip works good for getting down in there to work into there. Get that all loosened up and out. And it's cleaning up pretty good. So far that gear looks to be in good condition, so I'm not too concerned about that. Wipe it all out here. Use that hard plastic brush I was talking about. Got this from Harbor Freight. They're fairly cheap. It comes in a 3-pack of stainless steel, a brass in this plastic one. I usually use the plastic on the aluminum pieces. You don't want to use like the stainless steel. You don't want to damage anything. The plastic won't damage anything. So I'm taking clean all the teeth out on this gear. Okay. Take and wipe it all out. Pretty good here. Set that back over there. Clean up the pinion. There's grease buildup on the pinion. I'll use a little bit of penetrating oil to break that all loose. And cleans up pretty good. We'll take our brush and get the teeth of this pinion gear cleaned out. Get all that old grease out of there. We don't want that getting back into the gears and jamming everything up. I'll take and put a little lube down into this axle shaft hole here, and I'm not sure if my Q-tip will fit in there to clean that out. Oh yeah, easily. So clean that out. We want to make sure to get all that out of there, because that'll inhibit the performance of the reel. There. Wipe that off a little bit. Okay. Take this T-block here and clean it up. Get all the grease out of that groove. Let's see if we can go in. Yeah, we can get in there and get that out. Okay. Now I'll use my Q-tip again and get down here and get this grease out of here, any of this debris. There doesn't seem to be really any major deposits of dirt, sand, anything like that down inside the body. It seems like it actually was sealed up pretty well. Okay, looks pretty good. We'll clean this other bushing up. We'll take that right out. Get this other bushing cleaned up. Want to get as much of that stuff out of there as you can. There is nothing wrong with having a fishing reel that just has bushings like this. If you do have ones with bearings, the most important place to have the bearing is on the main gear, or on the pinion gear. That's where it has the most abuse, because the main gear rides on two supports here, one on each side, so it's supported pretty well. But the pinion shaft is just on that one spot, so you want to, that's a good spot for a bearing, and make this work real free and everything too with that bearing there. So that's about the best position. If you can have bearings on the pinion and the main shaft, that would definitely be a bonus. It'd make the reel that much smoother, but it's not going to be a real super big noticeable difference either. Get all this old dirt, sand, and everything off this. Make the body down a little bit here. Pretty decent reel. Most of the wording, lettering is all faded off over the years. It tells the gear ratio is 4.1 to 1. Single ball bearing. It's a 70 size reel or a 7000, so it is quite a large reel. All depends on the manufacturer though, because I've had 5000s that were bigger than this. Just the manufacturer, how their system is. It doesn't seem to be a standard in the industry. It seems to be basically based on what the manufacturer wants to call that size reel. It'd be kind of nice if it was a standard, if they were all that, followed the same rules and everything, but it don't really matter. I've been fishing reels for years and it hasn't made a bit of difference. Yeah, let's get our bearing out of here. Take the bearing out, try to clean it out really good. As much of that old grease out as possible. This is non-sealed bearing. Actually, one side's got the seal on it. That side goes towards the spool to keep the dirt out of the bearing, which it did do a pretty good job. I don't really see really much dirt. Mostly, gummed up grease, dried up grease. Take the penetrating oil here and want to spray that out. See if we can get any loose pieces out of there. And And we'll start lubricating and get this thing back together. Set that there. So I'm going to wipe the countertop off here because don't want any of this old dirt and debris getting back into the fishing reel. And pull this, clean this rotor up. Get that all out of there. Get down into here. That's where these Q-tips come in handy, or in these tight areas right here. Get any dirt out of there you can. Let's go down in here in the bottom and we'll wipe this all out. Like I say, try to get as much of that stuff out of there as you can. It'll benefit you in the long run because it won't fall back into the mechanism and jam things up. This here is the bail release. I'll flip it back. This bail is kind of sticky, but pushes up. Oh, that's actually pretty sticky too. Yeah, so we're going to have to take that apart, clean that up, and get that bail working better. Alright, I'm going to set this off to the side for the moment and go back to reassembling the reel. Get this all assembled, then I'll work on that rotor. Get the bail freed up, get it finished cleaning up everything. Okay, we're going to put our side cover bushing back in place. We want to line up them notches. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on it. Don't need a real lot, just a little bit's good. I use a Q-tip. I also have a paintbrush that I use for bigger stuff, but I'm going to use a Q-tip to getting down into this bushing. And put just a light coating into there. Don't need a lot. And I pulled it right out. What I use is this Super Lube grease. It's a very lightweight grease. It's a synthetic grease. It is rated for salt water. It's also very good for fresh water, obviously, if it's good for salt water. It temperature range of -45 up to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's got a very good temperature range. It does not gel up in the cold weather. I imagine it would if you got below the -45 degrees Fahrenheit. It would probably give you some issues, but I'm not thinking you're fishing at that temperature. You're probably freezing. So get a little bit of grease inside this case bearing here. This is the inner bearing. I'm sorry, bushing. I misspoke. Let's get it back down there. I want to make sure we get them notches lined up so it sits into place correctly. Well, there's that. Okay, now we're going to lubricate and put the eccentric drive in. So this is where I'll use the paintbrush. I like to take and fill the teeth of the gear up. That way it's got plenty of lubrication. And not overly lubricated. You don't want too much because too much can be just as bad as not enough. It'll gum things up just as bad as being dry. So there we go. I'm going to put a little bit on that shaft that it rides on down here. A little bit on the inside of the case. And that bushing that main gear rides against. I'll put a little bit on the face of that too, just to help. Drop this down into here. There we go. Alright, we're going to put our pinion bearing back on the pinion shaft and reinstall that. We don't want to forget the spacer washer. Okay, I want to put a little lubrication into this bearing. I'm going to hit it with just a little light coat of grease and then a little bit of oil. Just a little bit of grease down there. I don't want a lot. A lot of people just use oil. I like to do just a tiny little bit of grease. There we are. I'll put some 3-in-1 oil. I like using 3-in-1 oil. It's a nice lightweight lubricant. Put some down in there and lubricate that bearing really well. That'll work with that grease there and keep that grease nice and soft and moving or pliable. So what we can do is we can drop this pinion shaft down into here, or pinion gear and shaft. Then we'll put the washer or spacer, and then we'll put the gear. We want to make sure to put the sealed side out. There we go. That seems to be working fine, so we'll put the screws in. I like to try to start these screws by hand the best I can. That way I don't cross thread them, mess something up. There we go. That just causes more issues, but we'll snug these screws down. That holds that bearing and pinion in place. Okay. Alright, and now we'll lubricate. Well, actually, we'll stick the main shaft in after we put the T-block into it. Here we are. Lubricate this. Get a little bit of lubrication into that groove and on the face of it where it rides. And also along on here is this rides on the case in a couple of locations, so we want to make sure it's lubricated. Now this one here, you can see, you want to always pay attention when the orientation of this when you take it out. This one I know set this direction. This side is actually a little bit larger than this side is, the opening. So that's an indication also, but you always want to try to pay attention. Let's drop this in here. I want to make sure that pin lands in the groove, this groove, and that pin line up. It's real easy. That rides up against the top of the case. Now we can stick our axle shaft in. You see the axle shaft has a flat spot here, and you've seen that opening in that T-block I showed you. You want to line them up. It's a D-shape opening. Oh, hold on. We want to lubricate the axle shaft a little bit. Just a real light coat on it. Don't need a lot, because if you put a lot, as you push it into the pinion shaft, it will wipe itself right back clean. So there we go. Now I hold the T-block with my thumb, slide that down, slides right into place there. You can see the screw hole down in there. We're going to get it lined up, and then we'll put that screw back in place while we're right here. Sometimes you have to leave this piece out, this axle shaft, before you put the main gear in, because the main gear, this gear is sometimes larger and won't clear that. This one here obviously does, because it come out with the axle shaft in place. Oh, I accidentally got ahead of myself. We need to put the rotor on before this piece, so we're going to go ahead and take this back out. Wasn't paying attention, I guess. Take that back out. But we can still stick in the main gear. Let's lubricate the main gear. Lubricate the teeth. Get the teeth filled up here with grease. I want to lubricate the end of the shaft and this end here also. And then right where this spring is, I want to get just a little bit of lubrication on those grooves so that spring stays lubricated. That is a moving part. That spring actually stays stationary and the shaft spins. So you want to make sure that's got lubrication. You don't want to wear that out and have that break on you. So we're going to drop the main gear in. We've got to remember that this piece of that spring right here needs to go into this groove. And you can do it by looking through the side here. Some of these sometimes have a hole drilled in them for it's a sight window so you can see it. But this one here, you can see it fairly good without the sight window. Now you can test that. You can see right here is where the anti-reverse arm is. You can see when I rock that, it is moving. So it is in place, otherwise it would not be moving. Okay, now we're going to set this aside because I need to have, let's get this spacer put back on the main gear just so I don't forget it. That was on the outer bushing. Let's take this spool apart, get this working so we can put this on and finish reassembling this. What I'm going to do here is take this screw out to pull the bail off. That way if I pull that arm off, I'm not fighting the bail. Get that screw out of there and I put it right back into the bail. That way I know where it come from. I do not lose it because there's a few small screws here and I don't want to get them confused. This bail actually has a roller, so we want to make sure to lubricate that. Oops, I dropped the washer off that. That goes on this side here where this roller goes against it. There's a bushing right there too. So we want to just set that in a parts bin, parts tray. Okay, let's take this screw out and we'll pull the bail right off. That way I'm not fighting it. There is definitely dirt and debris down in there. There's nothing in this side. It's just, sometimes I'll have a release lever, a spring, that type of stuff in that. I'm going to pull this cover. That way I can get in there and clean everything really well and lubricate. Let's set that in the parts tray. See, there's absolutely nothing in that side. Now this side has a spring and the trip levers in this side, so we want to be careful disassembling this side. We don't want parts to go flying out. Set that in the parts tray. See, there's this spring, there's the trip arm or lever, so we want to be careful. We don't want that spring go shooting out. So I'm going to pull this screw here and get that bail arm off of there while I'm holding my thumb onto that spring and that trip lever so they don't come out of place. And then I took the screw out and I'm working the arm out. You want to pay attention. There's a notch on the back. I seen it was setting right there. You have two different pieces here that line up over here. One goes into this and one rides here. The bail trip lever goes on this groove and the spring fits into this one here, that hole there. All right, so let's pull those pieces out so we can get all the dirt out of it. Now the spring is under pressure, so you need to be careful you don't accidentally shoot it across the room. And I'm probably going to do that. It's not wanting to come off of there. There, pull it up off there. The spring's wanting to release, so I got to be careful. There we go. Now I'm going to lay that there as an assembly. This just sits into the top of it like that. Let's get this wiped out, cleaned out. Get all that grime and dirt out of there so this thing will function properly. I don't know if you guys could hear that when I was showing you before how the bail action was working and the gritty noise that you were hearing. That's because of all this grease and, I'm sorry, not grease, but sand and dirt, dust. Clean this side out. These Q-tips work really well for getting down in here. Get that stuff all out of there. Okay, get that now. Alright, this is a pivot point here. These are also wear or moving points, friction points, so I'm going to lubricate all this and then start reassembling those pieces with just a really super fine coat, because you don't want the grease to be gumming things up. Just a little bit. That's more than enough. I'm going to put some up into here because this is all moving parts. They go into here. Okay, get this piece back into here. This spring pushes against this, and this end of this plastic piece goes around that. So I'm going to put it in, and we'll load the spring. There we go. Now we got to get this little guy, this little wire arm, back into the hole on the top of that, just like so. And we'll wipe this off here. This is our bail trip lever. This will go down back into that groove. Now it moves much easier than it was earlier. I'm also going to put just a little bit of 3-in-1 oil into there just to help it along. You don't need a super amount. That spring is also moving parts, so it is good to lubricate that. I like to lubricate all the moving parts. Okay, we'll put our bail arm back on, and we've got to get them holes, them to line back up, which can be tricky at times. Oops. Oops, I pushed that right out of place. Whoops. Lubricated that too much. Now it's too easy to move. There we are. You can see that's all moving the way it should. Put just a drop of oil onto there so it can get down in between there. And put our screw back in. When you actuate this, you want to make sure you hold your thumb over that spring so it don't go shooting out. Now it's working as it should. Nice and free. Okay, so we'll put that, wipe the inside of this cover off and get it put on. Okay. This holds everything into place. That way you don't have to worry about stuff flying out at you. Get the screw put into it. Okay. Put the bail arm back on here. I'm going to put just a little bit, let's get just a super fine coat of grease on that shaft. There we go. Just to help it along. Let's see a little bit of dirt here we wipe out. Okay. This will go on. And we'll grab our screw and put it back in. Try to make sure to start them straight. You don't want to try not to cross thread. That's nice and free. We'll put that cover on there. Snug the screw up. Don't want it to be super tight. You don't want to strip it out. Okay, we're going to take this screw out of this, set it down for a second, take this apart, clean these pieces up right here. And get this. This may be meant to be dry, I'm not sure. It does have a plastic bushing inside of it. I don't believe it would hurt a bit to put just a touch of grease on the shaft and the outside of the bushing when reassembling, just make it that much smoother, I believe. I could be wrong. That's fine. Put it down in the comments if you think that's a bad idea, but I don't think it's going to hurt anything and keep it from parts from rusting up and gumming up. Worst thing, I guess, is it could attract a little bit of sand. And we got our flat washer over here. Goes right there. So get our screw back into here. I like to try to put those in and then line up. Oops. May as well put that washer right onto that screw. That screw's sticking out enough we can put the washer on. Get our bail put into place here. That bail's got a little tension on it, it seems. It feels like it may be bent, and that can cause things to bind up. So I'm going to try to bend that back so there's not quite so much tension on it. There we go. Touch more. There we go. Now it's lining up pretty good. That can cause binding. Pushing outward on both of these arms can cause them to bind up against the case. And that seemed to have quite a bit of tension on it, so I wanted to make sure to relieve that tension off of it. That way it doesn't slow down the bail triggering, the bail release. And hopefully it didn't hurt anything. Put just a drop of 3-in-1 on this side. I forgot to do that. I was just realizing. That'll work down in there. So you know this is working as it should. Nice and smooth, no grinding noise. So that's really good. Our little roller here turns, so we're in good shape. Okay. Now we can put the rotor back on. This shaft has 2 flat sides on it. The rotor has a matching opening. So we need to line that up, and it'll slide right onto that shaft, just like so. Now that had that split washer. We don't want to forget that. We'll put the split washer on. Put the brass nut. Always start these by hand, gently. Brass is a soft metal, and you can very easily damage it. It feels like it's going smooth. Doesn't look straight though. I want to make sure. There we go. There, I felt it go. Okay. It's always best to use a proper size socket on this, especially this being brass. I don't always use the socket because it's a lot quicker to grab my pliers. I'm trying to get into the habit of being sure to use a socket. That one probably, let's see. Nope. Yep. That one is a 12mm. Get my driver here. We don't want to over tighten it, but we do want it snug. We don't want it coming loose. Okay. That bail spins nice and free. Lubricant right there. Okay, now we can get our axle shaft in. Oh, spinning that, I knocked my T-block out of place, so I gotta get that back in, which is not a big deal. I can always pull the main shaft back out, grab the T-block, get it back into place, put the main shaft back in, making sure that that spring goes into the groove where it needs to be. Okay. Put our axle shaft in. Get it all the way through. Get the screw hole lined up. Now we can get the screw back into it. Snug it up, not overly tight. Okay. I'm going to put just a couple drops of oil down on these moving parts just to help lubrication. Right here, especially under this for that bushing. This bushing we've already lubricated, so let's go ahead and stick the cover on. The cover just slide right on. We'll get our 4 cover screws back in. I like to try to start them all before I tighten anything down, or if I start tightening them down, I don't tighten them down to the final step until all of them are in place, because sometimes you gotta let that cover move a little bit. So make sure they're all started, get them most of the way. And then I go back and tighten them all. So this one's the last one, so I'm going to go ahead and snug it right up right now. Does not have to be overly tight. This is a plastic body or graphite. You don't want to strip it out or anything. Don't take a lot of pressure to hold that cover on. And tighten that screw. Okay. This was set up as a left-hand retrieve. That's the way I like it, so that's the way I'm going to put it back. And take the screw out of the cover. I'm going to put just a little bit of layer of grease onto this just to keep it from sticking. It was a little bit stiff coming out. Just to keep it from getting stuck into their body. I've had them where they get corroded in, and that's makes it really rough to get them out. Put the screw down in here. Make sure you start it straight and it's not cross-threaded, then snug it up. That may not be the right handle for that. It's kind of a little iffy, but here we are. Let's try that. The bail's working as it should. The reel's working as it should, and the reverse is working. There's all that. We'll take it's a little bit of noise in there, maybe a little bit of bearing noise or gear noise. Not much you can do about it. We lubricated, cleaned everything, so it's a little wear issue. So let's get this spool all cleaned out, much of that dirt out as we can. I mean, if you want to, you can probably replace that bearing. I don't have one to fit it, so I'm not going to worry about it. It didn't look to be bad in shape, so I'm not going to get too concerned about it. It does operate smooth, just a little bit of noise, and not going to cause an issue, I don't think. There we are. Now let's take this drag apart, clean and lubricate that with all this dirt and grime and sand and everything. It's probably guaranteed to be down in there. This wire clip is a spring-loaded clip. It's under pressure. You want to be careful. Always try to hold your thumb on it or something when you're trying to pull it out, so it don't go shooting out of there and take your eye out or something. And reach in here. I take these out. I try to take them out individually and then stack them the way they come out. Sometimes that don't work. A lot of times they'll stick together. Like this one here, the fiber washer is stuck to it, so we'll peel that fiber off gently. These Silstars, I have a little issue finding parts for them sometimes, so I try to be really careful. Now that washer, then the fiber. Now here's the eared flat washer. That is metal. And that'll go on to this. Then we have our next fiber and another metal washer that should be keyed. So we'll take, that's the bottom spring washer. Here's our fiber washer. We'll peel that off, lay that there. We'll wipe our keyed washer off. See that it is that shape there matches the shape of the axle shaft. That locks the spool or the drag and everything to that axle shaft. This is a spring concave or convex spring washer. As you can see, it's not flat, it is curved. That's what puts pressure on it, on the drag. And we'll wipe this out. All that dirt and everything out of there best you can. Okay, Okay, we'll put the spring washer on. This one here, the center, the high spot was up toward the drag. That's why I'm going to reassemble it. We had that. We had the keyed washer. I'll put just a little bit of oil, just a drop or two. The fiber washer. Oops. Then the eared washer. And we'll put another drop or two on that. Give it a little lubrication. There. And then we'll put our final, this is also a keyed washer, as you can see. The final washer goes on the top. And we put our spring clip back in. I'm going to get one side started down in the groove, and then hold it with my thumb and work the other side down in. This one did not go bad. Sometimes I've had these things go flying across the room, and I'm just not fond of playing that game, trying to find it. I like to try to get this so it's not in that groove there, so it's over here. So I'm going to take it back out, rotate it a little bit. Try to take it out and rotate it. Just want it to be a little difficult. There we go. Now rotate it so it's not lined up with that opening. There we go. It's popped in. We want to make sure it's in that groove all the way. It's not going to work its way out. Okay. Now we'll take and we'll slide this onto that axle shaft. I'm going to put just a little bit on here, a little bit of grease. And that's mostly to protect that shaft from any moisture. Because, you know, it's a fishing reel. It's going to get wet. There's just a real light coat. Now this here, we're going to slide it on and then turn it to get those keyed washers lined up with the shaft. Sometimes it goes right in place. Other times it's a hassle. So slide it down. We hit the first washer. We'll rotate it. See it slide. Now it went right into place. And clean up our drag nut here. There we go. Get all that dirt out of there. We don't want to deposit back into the drag on the reel, means we just cleaned everything up. Alright, lock the drag down. Boy, that drag locks right up. That's got a strong drag on. You can lock that thing right solid. Okay, it is working. And our reverse is working. So we're pretty much done. I'm going to wipe the body all down, and the bail's tripping, so we're in good shape. Wipe any grease and everything off the body best I can. Of course, I've got some grease on my fingers, so it's not gonna, it's gonna get right back on it anyway as I hold it. I'm gonna see if I can find the correct lever. I don't believe that's the correct, handle for this reel. Seems like it's bottoming out here and getting tight when I tighten that screw down. So I'm gonna see if I can find a correct one, or maybe it needs a spacer in there or something. Excuse me. And see, if I pull it, you can hear it pulling it right down. And yeah, it tightens right up, so we're gonna have to figure that out. I don't believe that's the right handle for this reel. There we go. For now, we'll leave it a little bit just so the reel handle don't fall off. It's still pretty smooth. Put a little bit of 3-in-1 oil on that hinge area there. Just loosen that screw up, and we'll work that hinge just a little bit for that folding handle. There we go. Always want to lubricate the knob, the hand knob here too, whenever you can, because those like to get sticky, and this one's actually not, but just to drop right down here in the opening, and that'll work its way down into there. You can hear a little bit of squeaking, and now it's gone. That oil's getting down in there. The handle's working nice and smooth. Here we go. I do need to get a new handle. That is kind of causing a little bit of an issue, but we'll find that and get it put on. Alright, that's pretty much it for this video here. I appreciate y'all watching and hanging out with me this long. If you have, you might as well go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. Help my channel out. Just trying to get this going. If there's any fishing reels you'd like to see done, any questions I may be able to help with, I'm no expert by any means at any of this. A lot of this is trial and error, just like everything else. So I'll help you as much as I can. I appreciate you watching. Thanks a lot, and watch out for my next video. I try to post weekly. Don't always get that. Don't always happen with my schedule, but we'll see what we can do. Thanks a lot.